The main reason why we're here this morning is the beautifully titled The Client's Not a Moron, She's Your Wife. Delighted that both Simon and Paul from the Client Relationship Consultancy can be with us this morning. I think this session's taken almost a year to diarise, so we're very grateful that they can spend their time with us today. For those of you who don't know Simon and Paul, Paul spent more than 20 years in advertising at agencies like Ogilvy, Saatchi. He had his own agency called Cowan and Simon Gravatt. And unusually and perhaps uniquely, I think, he's also a qualified psychotherapist specialising in human relationships. And that is very pertinent to the subject matter of today. Simon...
I charge money for people to talk at me. This is an unusual experience where somebody's paying me money. Well, they're not, you're paying money to listen, so good luck. Yeah.
Simon was also in the advertising business for more than 20 years at agencies like Cogent, Leo Burnett, spent some time in brand consultancy as well, I believe, and the two of them set up the Client Relationship Consultancy in 2004. For those of you who don't know their business, they work with over 48, so nearly 50 agency groups around the world. We use them pretty extensively at AMV and have used them for a long time now and really value the contribution they make to our business. They work across clients in 60 countries. More than 1,500 accounts are operated by their business, spanning 20,000 individual clients, and they have somewhere approaching 200,000 individual pieces of client feedback on what clients think of their agencies. So there's probably nobody in the world better qualified to give us an insight into how clients see agencies and how those relationships work than these two guys.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm Simon and this is Paul. As Tom said, we set up the Client Relationship Consultancy in 2004 with the purpose of transforming the way that agencies relate to their clients and with their clients. Our team includes qualified psychotherapists like Paul. We also have people that have worked in agencies like myself and also Paul, psychology graduates and IT whiz-kids. So we're a couple of we're a company of bright young account managers, clever consultants, IT whiz-kids and a couple of grumpy old men, and I'm afraid that you've drawn the short straw this morning. Like a therapist, we never disclose who we work with, nor do we promote ourselves. In our 9 years of business, this is the first public talk that we've ever done, so I'm sorry to be telling you that you've shelled out £30 on a couple of novice and unpracticed speakers, but at least you have the consolation this is a unique event. The reason we decided to come out of the closet and lose our public speaking virginity was that we believe there's an opportunity for the industry to think differently about its client relationships. We believe that there's much that can be learnt from the world of couples counselling, and in particular, how to deal with a client who's always negative, or a client who is indecisive, a client who may be unclear in his or her feedback, or a client who maybe seeks to undermine the agency, or even in some cases a client who is abusive towards the agency. As Tom said, we work with 48 agencies. We cover 339 different agency offices in 90 cities and 60 countries. Over the past 9 years, we've collected 204,357 pieces of individual client feedback, which have helped inform our understanding of client-agency relationships. This morning, we're going to draw from this experience and focus on, in particular, on three broad issues of client issues, which are power, disclosure, and motivation to change. So we hope to leave you today with an awareness of issues concerning power, which will give you a perspective with which to interpret what's going on in your own client relationships, and a suggestion on how to motivate your client to change, so that together you will be able to surface and address any underlying issues that may be undermining your relationship. And also an understanding of the importance of disclosure, so so that you will be more easily able to identify what's being unsaid in your client relationships. And within these topics, we'll also cover ego states, feed forward, and small steps. For those of you who like clear signposting, here's the running order. So the introduction, that's me for about 5 minutes. Paul's doing about 20 minutes on power, ego states, and change. I'm going to do about 10 minutes on disclosure. And then feed forward, Tom said we're doing the feedback at the end. We're actually doing the feedback within the feed forward session, so you're going to have to give the IPA feedback. And then we've got a thing that we call small steps, and then there should be about 10 minutes for questions at the end.
I love this. I left advertising, you know, we're at that point where when we did pitches, we changed everything up until the last minute. And I thought, this would never happen again in my new life. Everything would be determined in advance. I have to say, I've never seen these slides before, so yeah.
Yeah, we did a rehearsal yesterday and had some feedback that we needed to have more signposting, so we've got a signposting.
So I don't know what we're doing this morning. It's a mystery. It's a complete mystery, but you'll be able to keep us on track.
So 50 years ago, David Ogilvy felt it necessary to remind the clients and ad folk of his day that the consumer was not a moron, but one of them, a real live person with thoughts, feelings, and human foibles, rather than a statistic on a media plan or a creative brief. Today, it feels timely to remind ourselves that it is the client who is not a moron, but a real live person with thoughts, feelings, and human foibles. With so much daily business interaction conducted through email or conference call, it can be all too easy to forget that our clients also live in the real world. Most relationship difficulties come from a separation of us and them. Almost all relationship breakdown comes from a failure of one party to put themselves in the shoes of the other person, and also to want to make that other person wrong, to be able to prove I am right, you are wrong. We sometimes...
By the way, for those of you who like to take notes, I would take a note of that, because one of the things that we do when we're in a pitch situation, which is we're focused on the other, we're trying to win their business, and it's a bit like when we're dating somebody for the first time, we step into the shoes of the other, we kind of over-identify with them. Relationship problems in clients and agencies are when we come about from this separation. We begin to move apart. So for those of you who like to take notes, this is a really important point, and we'll refer to this through the presentation as well.
Yeah. So we sometimes find that agencies can be too quick to dismiss certain clients as idiots or as stupid, who aren't capable of telling a good idea from a bad idea, or whom they feel are personally vindictive towards them. Now, while these assumptions may be perfectly well-founded, they're not conducive to building a strong relationship. So our criteria for success this morning will be for you to think twice in future before dismissing your client as an idiot or a moron, or at least to have spent some time perceiving and understanding the world from his or her point of view before you do so. Advertising is said to be a people's business. And so it is perhaps surprising that there's very little real training on people skills. Account management tends to be about managing the account. What training there is tends to focus on process skills rather than relationship skills, and how to sell ideas to clients on presentation skills, how to sell ideas to clients rather than on how to listen and to understand what your client really needs. The emphasis is often on what is called hard skills rather than soft skills. So in case you're wondering why we have asserted that your client is your wife rather than your husband, it's primarily as artistic license to draw upon David Ogilvy's original quote. But there is also an underlying message about gender. When David Ogilvy wrote his book, Confessions of an Advertising Man, in 1963, advertising was, as Mad Men has dramatised, a man's world. There were precious few women in the business and very few senior female clients. By comparison, our database of 21,134 clients, coming from 1,920 accounts, the majority, 56%, are now women. And interestingly, today's audience, 62% of today's audience are women, which also indicates that advertising may be increasingly becoming a woman's world. So at this point, I should really be handing over to a woman, but instead I'm going to hand over to a bearded man. Paul and I have been working together for 19 years. We didn't particularly like each other when we first met. We disagree on almost everything. So proving perhaps that the most enduring relationships don't necessarily need to be the most harmonious. The only thing probably that we're good at is telling each other what we think of each other's ideas. Sorry. And if nothing else, this is testament to the importance of open and honest communication. So Paul, having spent 30 years in advertising, including as a group head at Saatchi & Saatchi in its heyday, and then successfully starting up and running his own advertising agency, Paul completed a master's in change management, qualified as a psychotherapist, and is currently a practicing couples counsellor. So he's going to draw on this experience as he shares some learning about power, ego states, and change in relationships.
So what I've learnt from couples is that there is a real need for an equivalency of power for a relationship to be enduring, enjoyable and rewarding. And that same equivalency of power needs also to be present in all client-agency relationships. So there's one couple that came to me. I practice in South London near Nappy Valley, with the Balham and Clapham area, and there are lots of middle-class, young, bright couples. I remember one couple came to me and they presented in a really kind of interesting way. They were like one of us, I guess. And, you know, when we did sort of scratch beneath the surface, hello, welcome, come in. What was happening was that he was dominating, covertly dominating the relationship. And he did so by withholding the money or taking a really tight control of the money. Now, this does happen in couple relationships quite a lot, that one partner dominates the other. It's not always the man. It can be the other way. It's not always about money. But in this particular relationship, what was going on was that he held a very tight rein. And while she was contributing enormously to the relationship, and they had I think it was a 7-year-old son, what was happening was that he criticized her more and more. And the more he criticized her, the more she tried to work on the relationship and do the right things. And the more he criticized, the more he oppressed. And what was interesting was that he actually used their son manipulatively, overindulged the son. And this made it even more awkward. And the more she complained, the more she kind of resisted, the more he became controlling. And this was a really unpleasant relationship for them. And what was interesting, and it goes back to the issue of blaming each other, they both blamed each other for the start of this particular pattern. And it was getting worse. There was a kind of spiral going down. And it was a really uncomfortable place, not just for them, but also their son. I'm not going to tell you more about this because obviously there's a confidentiality around the work we do. But we can see that same power dynamic in client-agency relationships, that one up, one down. And there's a really interesting quote from an American client, quite simply, even when we say you're our strategic partner, you're still the agency, and we are still the client. Don't voice an objection more than once. Do what we ask, when we ask for it, and the world will be a better place. You can imagine what kind of client that would be to work on. And it kind of reflects that couple as well. Now, the difficulty here with both clients and agencies and with the couple is that pointing towards the other and blaming the other. That's the first part of this. The moment you start to blame the other, you begin to lose your power in the relationship. And it's true, he was the breadwinner, just as often the client, or it is the client that's got the budget and is providing the agency with the budget. There is a real analogy here. But it takes two to make a successful relationship. And there is always a choice to walk away or to create a change. That woman did not see that she had a power in the relationship. The power was not about doing more. The power for agencies is not about working harder when you've got a client that is oppressing you, because that is colluding with the status quo. And if you collude with the status quo, my experience of both couples and clients and agencies is that the situation gets worse. The more you work hard, The more you do, and many of us have been in that awful position of being on the, you know, in my day it was like, you know, on the 15th, 17th script, and my God, we can't get it right. And you just work harder and harder, and it just never seems to come right. My invitation these days, coming back into the business, is to say, you know, don't get that far. There is always a choice to stop. And if you work with an abusive client, and some of my family do work in agencies and do work on clients that are very, very tough, and my counsel to them is, stop it. You have the power. You know, life is too short. That woman had the power.